Cristo Rey podcast, the Cristo Rey podcast, coming at you. A podcast, Cristo Rey podcast, the Cristo Rey podcast, almost too good to be true. Today, the podcast proudly celebrates Veterans Day. How timely November 11th lands on a Friday this year. Veterans Day has been on November 11th ever since 1919, except briefly in the 70s when they moved it to October, but nobody liked that. So then they moved it back again. Podcast, Cristo Rey podcast, the Cristo Rey podcast, right in your ears. Podcast, Cristo Rey podcast, the Cristo Rey podcast. Oh boy, here it comes.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Cristo Rey podcast. I'm your host Ujjal, and I'm joined by my co-host Jay Sean.
Hey everybody.
And today is Veterans Day, and joining us for Veterans Day as special guests are Miss Dixon and Miss Dixon's mom, Miss WD.
Hello. Hello.
And they're joining us today because they have family that go all the way back to the Reconstruction era relating to military.
Yep, that's correct.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about your family history?
Sure. Most recent family history will be my uncle. This is Miss WD talking, by the way, and who passed away last year. He was a veteran of Korea and of Vietnam. So he served during those two wars. So he was a graduate of Tuskegee Institute, which is in Alabama. So once finishing that, he decided to enlist. And what I found out later, that being a part of the military, or at least being enlisted in the military, is part of our family history.
Does your family come from down south?
Yes, originally from Georgia. So my parents, be Char's grandparents, Miss Dixon's grandparents on her mom's side would be from Georgia. So that was also a way to do something other than stay and maybe work on a farm, because I also have land in Georgia which belonged to my great-grandfather. So farmers, landowners, so something to do other than be a farmer or landowner would have been to join the military.
Oh, that's nice. Serving for troops,
yes,
it's an honor.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of times, especially maybe in the Black community at that time, there maybe weren't a lot of opportunities. So to be able to serve, to literally travel the world, to have at least all your medical needs met, all those things, there weren't necessarily a lot of opportunities if you stayed in the States. And if you didn't pursue maybe something like a medical career or maybe law at that time, it's still very far and few between. So at that time, not only serving your country, but also making it a career so that you would have something when you retired.
Hi guys, it's Naomi. Are you interested in science and looking to join a club? Then why not join the Science Club, a club about science? Right after school on November 16th, Science Club will be taking a field trip to The Ohio State for special activities with the OSU Robotics Club. All are welcome, but you will need a signed permission slip to go. See Miss Bauman to get the permission slip. And until then, stay sciencey.
You said you also had family that related all the way back to Reconstruction era?
Well, what I found, and doing some research on Ancestry.com, I actually found a draft card for my great-grandfather, who was born in probably the late 1890s. I actually knew him from the time he died when I was 10 or 11. So I knew my great grandfather. And I always point out the fact that he was born maybe 16 years after slavery ended. So to think that someone that you're talking to right now is talking to someone who at one time had been born shortly after slavery ended. So, and then to know that that person also, he did not serve in World War I, but see, his draft card was really kind of fascinating, because it never occurred to me that he would have even been considered for the military. So yeah, that far back.
That's really shocking, because when people think of slavery, they think of it as being hundreds and hundreds of years ago and not really relating as much to now. But
exactly.
But that's not really the case. The impact is so strong, and it isn't as long ago as you think. And seeing that laid out for me is pretty shocking.
Yeah, and when I kind of presented that to people too, because you don't think of someone that you are having a conversation with now who had conversation with someone or know someone in their family who was related to that part. People think that's ancient history, but it's really not that far back. When you relate to, like I said, it was my great grandfather, and he was able to actually buy about 400 acres of land that have been split split among his descendants. And like I said, I still have 10 acres of that land in Georgia. He was a business person who, owned his own, along with others. He owned a funeral home, a laundromat, and things like that. So growing up, that's something that's in my past and in my family history. And to know that, like I said, from that, my uncle, who made the decision to join the military and to serve actually in 2 wars that are not very highly thought of. When he returned home from Vietnam, I mean, like right now, we always, thank our troops and we're so thank you for serving, all that kind of stuff. When he returned from Vietnam, it was not the case. Those soldiers were called baby killers. They were spat upon. They were just really disrespected. So he didn't get to, of course, he lived up until last year. So he got to experience the, thank you for your service. But when he actually returned from Vietnam at the time, that was not the case.
I didn't grow up in the time when the military wasn't very respected, as right now the military is very respected.
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you. So it's a little strange to think that it could be any other way.
Right. These recent generations, that's kind of how, like I said, which is good. It's good that you are living in a time when people do thank the military, where they do think that it's an honor to serve. So that's great that that's where we are now. So I think it's really interesting. And, like I said, looking at a historical perspective to serve, like I said, in Korea, which was called a conflict, and also the Vietnam, we called a war, but, a conflict. And to, like I said, to serve your country, to do, because I think a total of 20 years he may have served in the military. So to think that at one time, people didn't thank or honor them, but I'm glad that at this point that it's kind of turned around.
Yeah, it's a good change because these people are risking their lives, right? And for them to be treated badly when they get back home,
right?
Sad to see.
Yeah, it is.
Hi guys, it's Koya here from the Cristo Rey podcast to give you some info on Native American Heritage Month. We observe Native American Heritage Month every November in order to celebrate and acknowledge the achievements and culture of natives in America. A few ways you can celebrate this month are: visit a Native American historical site, do some research on which indigenous land you're living on by texting your zip code to the number 907-312-5085, and spreading awareness of the importance of this month to family and friends. Remember to listen to indigenous stories and fight for their rights and recognition always, not just in November. Peace and love.
I think it's also important, since, we talk about Veterans Day, since today's Veterans Day, is to remember those who are still feeling the effects of any wars they've been in, as far as whether it's PTSD or things like that, because currently a lot of our people who have served are suffering.
Yeah, that's a big issue. Before, I think it used to be called shell shock, but then the more scientific term now is PTSD, and it's been like affecting people for years. And generally, like, warfare has become so big and violent in comparison to like hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, you're right. I think that what's important regarding veterans and mental health, I think that, as the years go on, we do lose more of our veterans from wars like Vietnam and Korea and things like that. And those were the soldiers who were basically kind of told to suck it in, to kind of deny their feelings. So you have a whole generation of soldiers who didn't get a chance to express what they were feeling. I think, for example, I remember when my uncle came back from Vietnam, and we were actually, a lot of the family, we were at my grandmother's house, and my uncle tended to take nap, he necessarily didn't sleep all the way through the night, and maybe that was also because what was going on when he served in Vietnam. So I remember being told by my mom that when you would walk by him, don't tiptoe by, like you want to get by to let him know that you're kind of tiptoeing. Make noise, be loud, so he can hear you coming, so he can react, because perhaps in whatever he experienced when he was in Vietnam, people would, you had to be aware of the enemy sneaking up. So that was probably a symptom of, we didn't have the words back then, PTSD, but looking back, that's what that would have been. So to know that, like I said, I didn't know what that meant as a child. I just knew that if he was napping in the living room, to come in, stomping, making noise, being very obvious that I'm here, and he would kind of stir and look and kind of speak, then he might go back to sleep, as opposed to kind of trying to tiptoe by and he would wake up in a start because he was on a different kind of alert because of somebody sneaking up on him.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that despite like environment change, your body doesn't change as well. It's still
Right.
everything, and those effects last forever.
Yeah, you're right. They do. So because I'm, thinking of, like I said, he passed away last year in his early 80s, and he still catnapped. He would go to bed early, but that he would nap throughout the day and do certain things. And even then when I would come in, I'd still make noise and let him know. I have no idea if he still kind of felt that way, but being kind of conditioned to think like he's taking a nap. Don't try to tiptoe. Just come in, bang the door, hey, how you doing? And to wake him up, and he would, kind of rouse up and we'd have a conversation. So yeah, you're right. Those kind of effects last a lifetime. And like I said, we now have names to put on it. And we also have ways to treat, soldiers who come back with still the scars of war.
Yeah, it's much better that things like therapy have, there's more money being put into these sources because people are realizing that this stuff actually helps and it's not a waste of time. I know that
Exactly.
people back then used to think a lot that this was all like fake and it was like
Right.
all a trick, a sham. But these effects really do help, especially people that need it. And the fact that it's being more widespread is much better for the community and our soldiers.
Right.
They can recover from these effects. Did your uncle ever take therapy? Or
He did not. I don't think that, like I said, he was of a generation where people didn't talk about it. You didn't. It just was one of those things. And you didn't have a name to call it. I'm sure that he had some of those effects, but there was no. And I don't know that. And maybe the Veterans, Affairs is reaching out to more of the older vets because right now I think they are really concerned with people who've come back from current wars who are experiencing PTSD and who are contemplating suicide or actually going through with suicide because of that. But I don't know that they've reached that far back to Korea and Vietnam, to those veterans, because they, like I said, it's a whole different mindset, a whole different era. So my uncle never did receive any kind of that therapy.
I'm sorry to hear.
Well, that's okay. Thank you.
Hey guys, it's your girl Isa here. As part of Cristo Rey Columbus 10-year celebration, from time to time the podcast will feature special messages from Cristo Rey graduates. Here's one now.
Hi, my name is Najee. I am a graduate of 2019 here from Cristo Rey. I would say right now I'm in college as a senior, double major, double minor in business administration and management, business analytics with a minor focus in finance and accounting. I would say some words of wisdom coming from Cristo Rey, I would say is cherish those moments that you have, because the moment when you leave, you won't get that same experience.
So given, a lot that is often, at play when it comes to being in a military family, how would you say that having your uncle be in not only the military, but in such a extreme and intense war, an historical war, how would you say that shaped you growing up, especially being in the Black community?
Well, for me, because he was in Vietnam, and I didn't realize it at the time, because my undergraduate major is journalism. So I've always been interested in journalism. And I remember I would watch the news. I would watch the things going on, because that was one of the first wars that they really showed at dinner time, so to speak. It was on the news. There were reporters who were reporting from Vietnam. And I was kind of fascinated with that. So I wanted to know what was going on. And my mom didn't particularly want to watch it because her brother's there in this, in this jungle, in this fighting. So for her, it was very nerve-wracking. It produced anxiety for her, but for me, it just piqued my interest. And I think from my memory as a child with him serving in Vietnam, the Black community, the people that were from, maybe my faith community, from my family, we thought it was still an honor. Now, there were those who protested the war, who I'm sure when he returned did not have kind words to say. But as far as family, the faith community, the people who surrounded him, we were all very supportive of him.
Okay.
Good question.
So also to follow up on that, I'm sure that there are some listeners on the podcast that may be a part of a military family. Is there advice that you could give them on maybe just if they're, also struggling mentally or having any trials or challenges with being in the military family?
Well, there's all kind of services that are available for those who are enlisted in the military and for their families. And I think it's important to explore every resource that they offer you, even if you think you may not need it. So there are resources for, like I said, those who are enlisted and those who are family members. There are mental health resources for family members. So if it's a spouse of someone, if it's a child of someone who's in the military, whatever resources they offer you, take advantage of them. That's the most important thing. Don't let any resource go untapped. There's things and people there to help.
Miss Dixon, did you have contact with your great uncle?
What was really interesting as a child for me, I remember being told I wasn't allowed to ask anything about his military service or anything related to the war. Like, I remember thinking, like, I'm allowed to ask that, and that's it. I remember learning that it was very private. It was very private information. It was information he didn't want to share, so I wasn't allowed to ask. Because I just remember as a child the sternness of like, no, don't bother about that. And that's kind of what made me think, like, oh, people who serve in the military aren't going to talk about their experience, so I'm not going to ask. So I remember being in high school and someone asked someone who was a veteran of the Iraq War how many people he had killed. And I remember I kind of gasped to myself, like, what? You don't ask people those kind of questions. You don't ask them any questions. So for me, what I learned as a child was like, you don't talk about these things. You don't bother them about these things. Is that was a topic that kind of stayed in the dark. That's what my perception as a child was when it came to people who served in the military, because he was the really somebody who I spent the most time around as a child who did serve in the military. So I didn't really know people who were younger who had served. My experience as a child was mainly his service in the military.
Hey guys, it's Jade. Remember the hiking club? Well, it's been rebranded as the Climate Leadership Club. You should join, but don't take my word for it. Let's hear from a member of the club to tell you why.
Hi everyone, it's Andy. Our club, which was hiking previously, but now it's hiking and climate leadership. Along with hiking, we are going to learn about our climate, how to help it, and all together we could have some service projects that you could join, get your service hours. It'll also help the environment and help you with school. And it will just bring you all closer together as a community.
As you have grown up, have you been able to maybe hear stories, or has he spoken about any of his war stories?
What was kind of funny was last year I considered having him being interviewed for a podcast about his military service. So I asked my mother about it and she busted out laughing. And I remember thinking, I don't really know what that means. And she was like, well, you can try to ask him. But unfortunately, his health really declined and I never really had the opportunity to ask him. But it was something that even with me telling her, can I do this? I still was very unsure about how to approach the topic with him. He loved him to death, but he was very stubborn. And so I was not quite sure how he would respond to me trying to ask about that. So like I said, unfortunately, I was unable to get the chance. But even still, that inner child within me was like, I don't know if you should ask those. I don't know if you should even bring up the topic. That's why I asked my mother first. I was never going to go up directly and ask him. I had to kind of almost see what my mother would say. And her laughter didn't prompt confidence in me.
Do you know about like young people in the military now? Because you didn't know about it when you were younger, right? But have you had more contact with younger people that have joined the military, or do you know anything about them?
Well, yeah, the funny thing is, before I became a teacher, I actually tried to get into the Marine Corps as an officer twice. I injured out both times, but my perception of the military definitely did change. There are more opportunities and it is different. It's not to say that it is perfect and doesn't have its flaws, but my perception of the military did change. And kind of like what my mother said, we've gotten better with acknowledging our veterans and thanking them for their service, as well as what they have when they are in the military and when they leave the military. So definitely my perception has changed, and I got to meet people because I actually tried to get into the military twice. I actually got to meet people who were in the military. I didn't really stay in contact with those individuals, but I did get a different perception, especially trying to be in there and actually going through the training. It made me realize, like, wow, people have to be put through a lot and have to do a lot. And there's so much that it actually takes to qualify. Like, one thing I would tell people is don't think the military is your last option. Don't think that, oh, if I can't do anything else, I can do the military. You might actually be surprised that, if your eczema is too bad, you can be, not allowed to join the military. So my perception has changed for like, wow, these people go through a lot and it takes a lot just to even be accepted, let alone train and then serve.
That's surprising because some of the ideas that are in my head were like you said, that military is a last resort. If like nothing else works, there's always that. But now that you're actually talking about it, I'm thinking you're right. It's probably a lot harder than it looks like at first glance. There has to be requirements and everything to join, right?
Oh yeah, and one of the things, because what I did was try to go in as an officer. So in the Marine Corps, anybody with a bachelor's degree and who's over 20 can try to apply to be an officer. Like, I even had to get a waiver, which is something you need in order to be accepted for my tattoo.
Hey guys, Nishan here. October 27th was the junior retreat. We interviewed 2 juniors, Nancy and Makai, live at the retreat. Here they are to give us their thoughts.
I think it's been pretty okay. We've gotten to learn a lot about leadership and what it means to be a leader, and I think they had pretty fun games that we got to do with them.
I thought it was fun. We did a lot of fun activities in the beginning, a lot of team building, and then it was very, I wouldn't say like inspiring, I guess. Like, it taught us how to be a leader and like how to view ourselves instead of what other people view yourself as.
Remembering our values and knowing that our personal values are more important than what people might think of us.
There's a lot of different aspects in what they consider and they look at, and different branches have different requirements. Like, from what I've read, to be an officer in the Air Force, they typically take college kids that have a 3.7 average or higher. So if you have below that, you're going to have a lot harder time getting in, especially if you don't have one of the degrees they're looking for. So that's what because I didn't even know that there was a separate side. There's the officer side, which requires a bachelor's degree at minimum. And there's the enlisted side, which does not require anything above a high school diploma. So like, I got to learn myself about the military. I remember when I told him that I was trying to be an officer, he thought it was pretty neat. And I thought it was kind of nice to connect with someone who had been in the military and was like, you kind of know what this is like, kind of reaction. Because sometimes the phrase of you had to be there is definitely true when it comes to military training and service.
Yeah, you're giving us like new information, because I don't think a lot of people know this or have even thought of it in that way. So it's good to have like knowledge beforehand in case like something does happen, right? And you do want to go into the military. You have to remember some of the things that Miss Dixon said. So
I actually kind of have 2 questions.
Okay.
But okay, the first one is, Miss Dixon, what is a key, or I should say, what is a very significant high school memories that stuck with you? Because as you know, the viewers that are listening are high schoolers, and if there's any advice you'd like to give, especially for upperclassmen who are, slowly transitioning into adulthood.
That's a great question. I think because this is a college prep school, I think I'll stick to that. One thing I will say is, sometimes when you go from high school to college, there's a huge jump in the academic requirement. And I'll be honest, I could sometimes get away with not studying and doing things last minute in high school and still getting good grades. However, when I got to college, I had to learn the hard way, and I did have to grade replace a couple of classes. And grade replacing is not free and can mess with financial aid. I remember being told that too. So one thing I recommend is, if you don't have good study habits and you don't have good time management, this is a time to develop it. This is a time to work on it. Because I get it. I've been able to get away with not doing what I was supposed to do as a student and still getting that A or B. But in college, especially if you're going into a very difficult major and you're learning a whole new world of like, nobody's telling me I have to go to class. Nobody is telling me I need to be home at a certain time. High school does involve more hand-holding. And in college, you're kind of dropped into this environment and expected to know what to do, even as a college freshman. So I highly recommend developing good habits. One thing, when I learned I'm not trying to grade or place any more classes, I had a physical planner, and when I got the syllabus, I wrote down all the dates in that planner so I knew what was coming up. I even got to the point where I stopped procrastinating, where I would be able to relax and sip on some tea, knowing that I completed the project a few days ago and it's due today, and I'm relaxed. I am not struggling to finish something at the last minute. So make sure you get that time management, and if you need help, go for it.
Hey guys, it's Emily here, one of your podcast hosts. First, I want to say congratulations to everyone in the Cristo Rey podcast, because this is our 90th episode. Can you believe that? And can you believe that Rebecca, one of the seniors on the podcast, has participated in 75 of those episodes? I mean, that's incredible, considering that that's more episodes compared to any of the original podcast hosts themselves. Not only that, but she is the captain of the girls soccer team and is the student council president. Talk about a lot on one's plate. Being president of the student council, she has been able to lead many initiatives, mainly revolving around diversity and inclusiveness. This includes one of her more recent events, the Hispanic Heritage Food Festival, in which I may say the food was amazing. Speaking of which, here she is live at the event.
Hi guys, I'm here at the Hispanic Heritage Food Festival, and I'm here with Hapsatu. And you were here and you ate some food. Did you like the food?
Yes, I really enjoyed the food. It was very good.
What did you like? What else did you like about it?
So I ate the rice. It was like rice and chicken, and it was really good. It tasted like my homemade food that we make because I'm from Senegal. But it had like a twist, like they used salsa in it, so their rice was like really green, and it was really good because you couldn't taste the salsa, but like it was good. And then I ate this one, like I don't know what it was called, but it was like a donut, but it wasn't a donut. And it was just, yeah, that. It was so good. It was so good. Oh my.
Yeah, so I think you ate my food because we call that arroz con pollo, which is just like rice and chicken, and basically like what you marinate with is cilantro, so that's why it gets the color green. And yeah, and then the food's from Peru, because that's where my mom made it last night, so it was really, yeah, thank you.
But yeah, thank you. I still can't get over how delicious all that food was. Well, I just want to say one more final thing. Thank you, Rebecca, for the incredible culture you have started and will never fade away.
There are free tutors in college campuses. Take advantage of that. Even if like it's just to make a B into an A or to make an A into a higher A. There's nothing wrong with going to tutors. It's actually a great free resource that you should not, ignore.
Thank you for the information. That was actually pretty useful for myself as well, because I noticed too that sometimes I'm guilty of, maybe not working as hard or procrastinating, and I still get away with having a grade, but I also struggle with procrastination and, not maybe being as efficient in work as I could be. So that was actually really helpful for me as well.
Yeah, I learned the hard way. So I have no problem being totally honest. It's not free to grade or place, and it's not fun to sit in the class knowing if I would have done it the right time, the first time, the right time, I would have been good. But it's like I'm sitting in this mess because I created it. And I acknowledge that. I even told myself when I was really stressed out, because I procrastinated, I kept telling myself, you see this feeling, you don't like it, right? Avoid it. Don't do this again. So I even talked myself through those high stress procrastination moments to say, you see this feeling, don't put yourself into the situation again. Because it's not fun when you're really stressed out and you realize I have 2 hours with something that should take me 5 hours to complete. So it is not a fun stressor to have. So if you can start to remove that desire to procrastinate and just get started. That's like when I would get a project or when I would get a paper, even if it was very minor, like let me get my sources, let me start typing up the intro, even if it seems silly. As soon as you hear about something that you know is major and might be due what seems like a really far date, just start it immediately. Because what I've noticed is I'm less likely to procrastinate if I start it immediately. And every time I think of it, I just do a little bit more.
Well, since both Miss Dixon and your mother, Miss WD, are here, do you guys have any special stories together that you'd like to share?
Well, since we're on the Veterans Day podcast, I was just going to share that when Miss Dixon went to training for officers training for the Marines, it was really weird because that was several weeks of no contact other than letters. And when you're used to talking to somebody every day or at least texting them, so that's one of those things to think about for people who may be interested in the military. When you go, it's kind of like a complete break, a separation. So I remember sitting down and writing, long letters and mailing these big fat letters. But when she did get to call me after 3 weeks, because she had to yell so much, she sounded like that. She had no voice, and she was, She was hyped up because every response was, yelled. So she's on the phone with me yelling with her hoarse voice. So that's just my little story regarding, connecting it to Veterans Day was her first phone call home after she'd been away for 3 weeks.
Oh, that's a nice story. Yeah, the military is very strict. Fun to hear some stories about like drill instructors. But yeah, this has been the Veterans Day podcast. Thank you so much to Miss Dixon and your mother, Miss WD, for joining us today.
Of course.
You're welcome.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Mr. Corrigan here. Before we sign off today, Miss Dixon has graciously shared with us a clip from her great uncle's funeral. Thank you, Miss Dixon and Miss WD, for sharing this precious family moment with the Cristo Rey community. Now, on this Veterans Day, let us join in honoring Miss Dixon's great uncle, Teza Mervyn Hutchins Jr.
He selflessly made himself available when the nation needed him. But now his duties are complete, and he has finished his final long hike to his bivouac in this sacred place amongst his brothers and sisters who have gone before, to rest in eternal peace in this national shrine, an honor granted to only a few by a grateful nation for his honorable and faithful service. Our rifle squad has assembled to honor him with a 3-volley salute. The report of the rifles is quite loud, so if you have sensitive hearing, you should cover your ears. Following the rifle salute, the bugler will render taps. It is customary to place your right hand over your heart while taps is being played. Current and former military may stand and salute while taps is being played. Squad leader, honor this veteran.
Fire squad, attention! Port arms! Have right, peace! Ready, aim, fire! Aim, fire! Aim, fire! Reset, arms!